I recently faced something no parent should ever have to deal with. 3 HOA goons showed up at my door to take my kid away. The reason? A supposed violation of HOA custody compliance. Our neighbor, Gladys, was grinning like she just saved my son's life. Funny thing is, the only ones who ended up being taken away were them. In an ambulance. Let me rewind a bit. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from today. If your HOA sends 3 dudes in tactical gear to talk about paperwork, you either live in the most aggressively managed neighborhood in America, or you're about to have a seriously bad morning. Guess which one I drew the short straw on. I hadn't even finished pouring my coffee when the knock came. 3 loud, flat-handed thumps, way too heavy to be a friendly neighbor. It wasn't the kind of knock you answer barefoot. It was the kind that made me briefly wish I still had the old shotgun by the door. I opened it slowly. 3 guys. Not mailmen, not meter readers, not delivery drivers with a busted GPS and a fragile box of regret. Nope. These guys were rocking matte black tactical vests, reinforced boots, and knockoff comms clipped to their shoulders, like they wanted to look official without actually breaking any laws. The only things missing were the fake mustaches and a sign that read, "Not cops, please believe us." The tall one in front stepped forward like I was expecting him. He had a buzz cut, wrap-around sunglasses, and the smug confidence of a guy who practices arrest poses in the mirror. "Mr. Miller," he said, scanning a clipboard like it held the launch codes for a nuke. "We're here for a scheduled compliance review under HOA custody ordinance." I blinked once, didn't say a word, just sized him up and down like I was trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank or an exceptionally misguided military-themed podcast recording. The other 2 stood behind him, one stocky, arms crossed like a bouncer in a bad mood, the third one young, lanky, and clearly not built for tactical work, kept shifting on his feet like he had a serious case of buyer's remorse. They didn't look nervous, they looked prepared. Too prepared for a paperwork check. "We've received a behavioral concern regarding a minor, 8-year-old Alex, under your care," the tall one continued. He didn't look at me when he said it, he looked past me, into the house, toward Alex's room. I stepped forward and closed the door a bit behind me, keeping myself between them and the doorway. "You just said a whole lot of words," I told him. "None of them made any legal sense." He flipped a page. Under Article 4.7c, the HOA retains the right to conduct minor safety compliance evaluations if a resident has been flagged as high risk. He finally looked up. "We're here to evaluate Alex's living conditions." "Alex isn't a filing cabinet," I said, "and he sure as hell isn't subject to whatever spreadsheet fantasy you guys are working with." Stocky crossed his arms tighter. Clipboard guy didn't even flinch. "Non-cooperation will be logged," he said, like he was issuing a parking ticket. Across the street, Gladys stood near her flower bed, sipping something from a stainless steel tumbler. She was dressed like a tennis coach who'd given up on exercise. Her eyes were locked on us. She didn't blink, she just smiled, then she waved and mouthed, "It's for the best. I wanted to break something. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much." The young enforcer cleared his throat. "We can escalate this through proper channels, but our recommendation was to start with a non-invasive approach." "That's what this is?" I asked, stepping off the porch toward them. 3 guys in tactical vests knocking on a vet store at sunrise? You call that non-invasive? Buzzcut didn't move, didn't blink. "Are you refusing inspection?" he asked. "I'm refusing something," I said, still trying to find the right word for it. He opened his mouth to speak again but paused. That's when he noticed my posture had shifted, feet shoulder width apart, hands loose at my sides, head tilted just enough to gauge the distance between me and that clipboard. He knew if he made one wrong move, I'd put him down faster than he could say compliance. The silence stretched out. Gladys kept filming with her phone. My coffee sat cold behind the door. Finally, Buzzcut said, "We'll report non-cooperation and initiate Phase 2. Thank you for your time." They turned and walked, not rushed, not panicked, just efficient, like they'd done this ridiculous song and dance before. I watched them reach their car, an unmarked black SUV with tinted windows and no license plate on the front. Phase 2 stuck in my brain like a splinter. Behind me, I heard the floorboards creak. Alex, barefoot and still in his pajamas, stood halfway down the stairs. He didn't ask what happened, he just looked at me, eyes wide, breathing shallow. He'd heard enough. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, didn't speak. I walked outside, stood where the enforcers had stood. My foot bumped something, a sheet of paper, folded once, lightly creased, left on purpose. I picked it up. Alex's name, a date, and 2 words stamped in red, Phase 2 approved. They came with smiles, a clipboard, and tactical gear they barely knew how to use. But now I knew something they didn't. Turns out, they weren't bluffing, they were rehearsing. And next time, there wouldn't be a warning. The 4th citation was duct-taped to our front door, not slid in the mailbox, not tucked under the welcome mat, but good old duct-taped. Alex found it first. He just stood there, staring at it until I walked up and peeled it off the wood. Violation, visual disruption, front yard neglect. The crime? Alex's bike left on the lawn for 2 hours after school. $75. Below that, in faint gray ink, persistent visual disruption may trigger compliance monitoring per Article 4.7c. I read that line twice, then once more. I didn't tear the notice up, didn't curse. I just folded it once, placed it on the counter, and made coffee, even though my fingers were shaking. At breakfast, Alex picked at his cereal like it had personally wronged him. Sarah stared at the wall. No one said anything. Finally, I asked, "You want me to take you to school today?" Alex shrugged, then muttered, "I didn't do anything." Not "it's fine." Not "I've got it." Just, "I didn't do anything." And that's when it hit me, he wasn't scared of getting in trouble, he was scared they might be right. Nate walked in 5 minutes later, holding 2 Red Bulls and a flash drive like he'd just stolen nuclear launch codes. "Okay, I did something," he said before I could even ask. "Technically legal, morally shady, but necessary." He spun his laptop around and opened a folder labeled Project of Willow Glen. Inside, timestamps, photos, reports, 32 families, every single one of them with a flag, a child, a citation, a single parent, a veteran. And at the top of the list, me. Alex's profile was tagged 8A, stability monitoring required. Mine said John Miller, unstable/volatility risk, prior combat, resistance to mediation, surveillance authorized. The photos punched me in the gut. Alex leaving school, me pacing in the driveway, a still shot of Alex in our backyard outlined in red. Alex's fingers curled around the table edge. Sarah said nothing, just leaned closer, her jaw tight. Alex pointed at the screen. "They think I'm not safe here." I didn't answer, didn't move. Then came the real gut punch. "They think I'm not safe because of you." Sarah's eyes flicked toward me, sharp, concerned, not blaming, but searching. And me? I had no defense because this wasn't about what I had done, it was about who I used to be. Nate cleared his throat. "This isn't just a watch list," he said. "This is pre-clearance. These are prep files. They're building cases before removals." "How long?" Sarah asked, her voice low. "Months," Nate said. "Gladys didn't start this, but she's feeding them actively." I stood up. "Don't," Sarah said instantly. "You're not ready." "I am angry," I said, "and she's counting on me not to act." "That ends today." Alex spoke up. "I want to go with you." "No," I said quickly. "You stay here." He didn't argue, but the way his shoulders slumped told me everything. Gladys was in her front garden again, always pruning, always smiling. She had a Bluetooth headset in one ear and lemonade in her hand, like she was recording a podcast for psychopaths. When she saw me, she didn't flinch, didn't blink, just smiled wider. "John, She said, "Did you see the latest newsletter? Pickleball's back." "You're flagging my son," I said, my voice tight, "and surveilling my house." "I don't flag anyone," she replied, her tone light. "That's what the system's for. I just observed patterns." "You filed photos?" "I submitted evidence," she said, her cheerfulness unwavering. "It's my duty to report when children may be in unsafe conditions." Her words were sweet, software practiced, but every syllable was a knife. "You mean kids with veteran parents?" I said, stepping closer. Gladys's smile didn't fade. She just sipped her lemonade. "You'd be amazed how often that's the overlap." I stepped closer. "You think you are protecting the neighborhood, but all you're doing is abusing a system no one's watching." "I am watching," she said, her eyes finally meeting mine, a hint of steel in her gaze. "That's the point." There it was. Not a slip, not a mistake, just a woman who thought oversight was ownership. She reached into her apron, almost forgot, then held out an envelope. No return address, just a sticker on the flap, "Safe Start Family Oversight Division." "Came to my house by mistake," she said, her voice still friendly. "Figured you'd want it." I didn't take it, not right away. She leaned in just slightly, her smile never faltering. "Take a break, John. You're spiraling, and Alex doesn't need chaos in his environment." That was the blow. She said it with the warmth of a friend, like she was offering a casserole, but it hit harder than any punch I'd taken overseas because I knew now this wasn't just a Karen on a power trip. This was systemic, intentional, weaponized neighborliness. She turned and went back to her roses like she hadn't just dropped a bomb on my life, the envelope still dangling between two fingers. And I stood there, jaw tight, every cell in my body screaming not to move, not yet, because I wasn't just going to fight her, I was going to dismantle the system that let her exist. Alex was gone. His bed was empty. Back door cracked open. Side gate swinging in the wind. No note, no shoes by the door, no phone. Just a quiet house and the cold slam of realization hitting my chest like a freight train. Then I saw the text on the kitchen counter. His phone was unlocked. One line on the screen, "Meet me, it's urgent, Lex." And in the distance, a muffled yell, not loud, not long, just enough to freeze the air around me. I moved fast. The night was heavy, no moon, 2 flickering streetlights, and the kind of quiet that felt manufactured. I crouched low, cutting across hedges, staying in shadow. Then I saw them. Black SUV, rear doors open, Alex struggling. 2 men dragging him by the arms, one standing lookout, scanning a tablet. No clipboard, no hesitation. Tactical gear, same as before, but this time they weren't asking. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. I didn't shout. I stalked, closed the distance like a ghost. The lookout turned. I struck, 1 punch, windpipe. Down. The taller abductor turned. I grabbed, pivoted, slammed him into the SUV. Metal dented, his spine folded. Alex twisted, kicked 1 in the shin, gave me an opening. I dropped to a knee, hooked his leg, twisted hard. He screamed like a kicked dog. Alex pulled free, scrambling back. 3 men down. I grabbed the tallest by the collar, pinned him to the car. "Who sent you?" No answer. He looked left. I followed his gaze. Tablet on the dash, red blinking dot, 8-day asset transfer in progress. I zip-tied his wrists behind him and whispered, "Try again." This time with details. Still nothing. Cowards like him never talk without permission. Sirens in the distance, lights flicking on, neighbors waking. Gladys already standing on her lawn like a director watching a scene unfold exactly as planned. Still filming, still smiling. Cops pulled up, 2 cruisers and a watch commander. Step away from them. 1 officer shouted. I complied, arms up, calm voice. "They tried to abduct my son." The officer looked from me to Alex, then to the zip-tied pile of meat at my feet. 1 ran to the SUV. 30 seconds later, he came back pale. "There's a manifest," he said. "GPS routes, labels, Safe Start logo stamped on every page." Alex stared at him, then at me. He said, "Lo, so they were really going to do it." He wasn't asking. Gladys stepped forward, not scared, not smug, just calm. "You always make things worse, John," she said. "This could have been a peaceful resolution." I turned slowly. "You ordered this?" I recommended escalation. They acted independently. Alex's voice cracked. "You think this is protecting me?" Gladys looked at him like a disappointed aunt. "Alex, sometimes safety means separation." That's when Alex snapped. "You think he's the problem? You don't know what he's done to keep me safe." Gladys didn't flinch. She looked at the cops. "This is what I meant. Emotional volatility. Sudden aggression." One officer shifted. I saw the flicker in his eyes. He was hesitating until Alex stepped forward and said, loud enough for the crowd, "She sent people to take me." You saw it, everyone did. That sealed it. The cops detained the men. "Gladys?" She just turned and said over her shoulder, "You're not well, John." That's what worries me most. We drove home in silence. Alex stared straight ahead, then, soft, "Did you hurt people like that before?" I nodded once. "Worse." He nodded back, didn't speak the rest of the night. I stayed up watching the front door. Didn't sleep, didn't move, just read the tablet's hidden folder, Phase 3, Re-Education Protocol. Guardian, Stratton, my last name. My photo. And a field labeled time of collection, to be determined. This is no longer about saving my son. Now they're coming for me. You ever relive a moment so often it rewires your body? That's what Fallujah did to me. One warehouse, one girl, 1 second too slow. My team used to call me Stat, short for static, because I didn't move unless I had to, didn't react, didn't flinch. They thought it was cool, they didn't know it was survival. We were clearing an alleged weapons drop. Intel said the building was cold, but when we breached, wrong. 5 targets. One fired first, hit our comms guy in the hip. Everything turned red. We moved fast, 2 down in under a minute. One retreated north. That's when I heard it. Not a gun, not a man, a scream. Female. High-pitched, not angry, scared. I turned and found her. 9 years old, maybe less. Hands over her ears, tears on her cheeks. No weapon, no vest. She wasn't part of this, she was caught in it. I don't know if she was a relative, a hostage, a shield. All I know is she looked at me like I was the monster in her closet, and then she ran out the side exit toward our evac perimeter. I could have stopped her. My hand twitched, my feet didn't move because for one breath, just one, I saw Alex's face. Same eyes, same fear, same way he used to freeze up in a crowded store. And in that moment, I couldn't pull the trigger, couldn't run, couldn't do anything. She ran straight into gunfire. The report said unidentified civilian. The after-action review called it regrettable. No one blamed me, but I did because I could have grabbed her, carried her, shielded her. But I didn't. That memory came back last night, not in a dream, in the kitchen. Alex came downstairs past midnight, silent, pale, got a glass of water like he was trying not to wake ghosts. He didn't know I was watching from the hallway, didn't see my grip tightened on the wall because I was shaking. Sarah stepped beside me, soft voice. "You scared him." I didn't answer. "He's alive," she said. "That's not the same thing." Her voice was calm, too calm. "You think you're protecting him, but he's learning how to disappear inside himself, just like you do." That one landed hard because it wasn't about discipline, it was about trauma. And suddenly, I couldn't breathe. I sat down with Nate's files, everything he'd pulled from the Safe Start system. They didn't just have citations and footage, they had me. Therapist records, private VA session logs, a psyche eval from 4 years ago I barely remembered filling out. And then I saw it, a direct quote from a session, "Some nights I feel more dangerous to myself than to anyone else." They'd logged it under flagged for aggression, Emotional instability, potential self-harm risk. Guardian evaluation recommended. Subject, Stratton, minor 8A. They used my lowest moment as their justification to remove my son. I stared at the screen, at the timestamp. I remembered that night. I hadn't slept in 3 days, hadn't seen Alex in 5, was coming off a meds trial that scrambled my head. I wasn't broken, I was rebuilding. And they used that moment like it was a confession. Sarah came downstairs an hour later, found me still staring at the screen. "You okay?" she asked. "No." She sat down next to me, didn't speak, didn't touch me, just sat. And that meant more than any word could have. I thought that was it until I heard him. "Alex," from the hallway, quiet. "You didn't sleep either." I looked over. He stood in the dark, hands in the sleeves of his hoodie, eyes full of something I didn't know how to name, shame, love, fear, all of it. I nodded. "You don't have to go to war for me," he said. I paused, then said, "It's not just for you." He nodded, walked back upstairs, and I finally stood because I had work to do. They called me dangerous, unstable, unfit. But they forgot something critical. I've spent my whole life controlling the monster inside me. Now, I'm going to let it loose. Alex screamed, not loud, just sharp enough to slice through the house like a razor. Then the sound of a body hitting dry wall. I was off the couch in 2 seconds, no shoes, no weapon, just instinct. I hit the hallway at full sprint, just in time to see a man in full black tactical gear dragging Alex by the collar. Alex was kicking, twisting, arms flailing, not crying, not yelling, fighting, but he was losing. The man barked into a headset, 8A secured. Guardian status unclear. Not tonight. I didn't wait. I hit the first one mid-sprint, shoulder to ribs, took him down hard. Alex rolled away. I landed 2 punches center mass, then elbowed him in the throat. He gasped once, then nothing. Second guy came from the kitchen, knife in hand. I kicked the chair into his legs. He stumbled. I tackled him over the table. Glass shattered, blood on the floor. The house groaned like it was coming apart. He slashed, grazed my arm. I grabbed the coffee pot and smashed it across his face. He crumpled. Sarah screamed upstairs. I heard her running. Then came the third one. Big, calm, efficient. He didn't run, he advanced like he was used to finishing fights someone else started. He got 1 punch in, straight to my ribs, hurt like hell. I countered with a headbutt. We both stumbled. Then I saw it. He had Alex's photo on his chest rig, printed, laminated, like a hunting tag. Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the man by the collar, yanked him forward, and drove him through the wall. Plaster rained down. Sarah screamed again. Alex yelled my name. I didn't stop. 1 punch, 2, 3. Then I caught myself. He was down, breathing barely, and I was still punching. I stood, stared at my fists covered in blood. Sarah ran in, pulled Alex into her arms. He was shaking, eyes locked on me, not like I was a hero, like I was something he didn't recognize. I grabbed a zip tie, secured the one still breathing. The other 2 out cold, one twitching, one not. I didn't check pulse, I didn't care. I found the phone clipped to the third guy's belt, unlocked it with his fingerprint. Inside, Zfil schedule. Guardian interference likely. With a timestamp, 3 a.m. They came for us at the scheduled time. Then came the worst part. Alex looked at me, voice barely audible. "You said we were safe." No judgment, just pain and disappointment and fear. I opened my mouth to respond, but I had no answer. Cops arrived 15 minutes later, not local city. 2 squad cars, 1 cruiser, plain clothes, professional but twitchy. They saw the bodies, saw the broken furniture, saw the bruises on my knuckles. The taller one stepped forward. "Sir, step back from the men. They broke in," I said. "Attempted abduction." Again. He glanced at Alex, then at the blood on the wall. "You do this yourself?" I didn't blink. "Yes." He reached for his cuffs. "You're going to have to come with us." "Check the phone," I said, tossing it to him. He caught it, scrolled, stopped, looked up. "What is this?" He read aloud, "Guardian removal scheduled. Phase 3 active." "What the hell does that mean?" "It means they didn't come to scare me," I said. "They came to erase me." Alex stepped forward. "It's all true. That made them stop." "Really stop?" Alex's voice was flat. "Finally. They were taking me." I nodded. Sarah added, "And if he hadn't, you'd be dragging out a body bag right now." That landed. The cops backed off, told me to sit. Said the men would be processed. I knew what that meant: paperwork, spin, delay. But they didn't arrest me, and that was enough. Later, I scanned the phone's files again, found the folder. Not just us. Dozens of families, all marked Phase 3, all with a time, a location, a parent. And next to our name, status, incomplete. Cause, guardian resistance. Then I found the call log. Outgoing to a familiar number. I played the audio file. Gladys's voice: "Proceed. Keep it clean. He won't fight. He's exhausted. They all crack eventually." I stared at the screen. My hand shook. Then I tapped edit, deleted the word guardian from the file name, replaced it with Miller, father still here. Saved. I turned off the lights, locked every door, sat by the window with a cold compress on my hand. Alex came downstairs an hour later, didn't say anything, just looked at me. And for the first time in days, he didn't flinch. "Tomorrow morning," I said, "I'm walking into the HOA board meeting with the phone, the files, the evidence, and Gladys. She wouldn't be hiding behind procedure anymore because I wasn't coming to ask questions, I was coming to end her reign. You can fight a man who breaks into your home. You can stop him with your fists. You can make him bleed. But what do you do with the woman who sent him and still shows up smiling at the next HOA meeting? That's Gladys. She didn't kick my door in, she paid someone else to. And now she was sitting in a folding chair under fluorescent lights like nothing happened. Same pearls, same clipboard, same smirk. But today, she wasn't chairing a meeting, she was about to preside over her own collapse. Willow Glen's HOA board meetings were normally sleepy affairs, mostly retirees pretending to care about hedge height. The room always smelled like weak coffee and mild resentment. But today, it was packed. Neighbors, journalists, people who hadn't shown up in years. And at the front of the room, 7 board members seated like a suburban Supreme Court. Gladys sat center, beige pantsuit, lipstick perfect. Her smile said, "This is under control." Spoiler alert, it wasn't. "Mr. Miller," she said with a saccharine tone, "we weren't expecting you." I didn't respond. I just walked up to the podium and placed my phone on the mic stand. Then I pressed play. "Proceed. Keep it clean. He won't fight. He's exhausted. They all crack eventually." Her voice. Her orders. The silence after that clip wasn't awkward, it was surgical. People didn't cough, they didn't whisper, they just looked at her. "That's from the body cam of a man who broke into my home," I said, my voice ringing in the room, "at 3 a.m., who zip-tied my son, and was authorized by the sports chairwoman to remove me from the premises, permanently." Gladys blinked once, then smiled. "That recording is clearly taken out of context." "Which part?" I cut in. "Proceed? Remove? They all crack eventually." Dennis Withers, the vice chair, tried to step in. "Mr. Miller, we're not here to litigate. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much." "Then resign," I said. "Because what I'm about to read isn't hearsay, it's data. Your votes, your emails, your signatures, and your funding links to a black badge contractor called Safe Start, a shell company with no published oversight and a very real body count." He shut up. Gladys's jaw stayed tight. I dropped a flash drive on the board table like a grenade. "Everything you need to verify the existence of Project Dove, your little family wellness pilot that's really just a legal framework for targeted removals. 33 flagged homes, dozens of kids, all under surveillance, all scored for emotional instability risk. This is slander, Gladys said. You're not well, John. You never have been. She turned to the audience. This man has a history of violence, of mental strain. There's a reason he's been flagged for intervention. And frankly, maybe it's time someone looked into his capacity. That was her swing, weaponizing the language of wellness, make me look unstable, unfit, dangerous, so when I fall, people cheer. But the problem was, I brought receipts. I clicked again. Another clip played. Accelerate phase 3. Frame it as neighborhood safety. No one questions anything if you say the word child. Dennis stared down at his desk. Then someone in the audience stood up, an old man in a military jacket. My daughter got one of those letters, he said. Said my granddaughter was potentially at risk. She's 6 years old, Gladys. You sent that. Gladys started to answer, but another voice cut her off. Mrs. Delaney, old, fierce, pink cardigan of doom. I second his motion. Someone else stood. Third. And just like that, it spread. Voices raised, hands went up, phones recorded. Gladys stood, didn't slam anything, didn't yell. She just stood staring at me like I'd undone a decades-long plan with one flash drive. And maybe I had. But before the vote, she fired one last shot. You're not saving your son, John. You're turning him into you. I didn't answer because she wasn't wrong. And that scared me more than anything. The board voted. Gladys was suspended. Dennis resigned. 5 minutes after Sarah stepped down, an emergency audit was ordered, Safe Start's funding was frozen, and the police were notified. I walked out into the sunlight, my file clutched in one hand, the whole damn neighborhood watching me. Jessica leaned against the car. Michael was in the back seat, window cracked, hoodie up, watching me like he wasn't sure who I was anymore. When I opened the door, he didn't speak right away, just studied me, not as a kid, but as a witness. Did she fall? I looked at him, smiled slightly, paused. She got pushed. He didn't smile back, he just nodded, like he'd expected it. That night, my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered. No one spoke at first, just breathing. Then a voice I didn't recognize, low and measured. Phase 4 wasn't hers to approve. Silence. We don't clean up messes, we bury them. Click. The line went dead. I stared at the wall, at the photo of Michael from when he was 6, missing teeth, birthday hat askew, chocolate frosting smeared on his face. The last time I thought I could keep him safe just by loving him. Now, that wasn't enough. Karen was a pawn, and I just knocked the board over. But whoever was playing her still had the rest of the pieces, and I was done playing. Michael was asleep on the couch, not in his bed, not upstairs, down here near the door, still wearing his hoodie, shoes on, like he didn't trust the house to stay standing. I sat in the chair across from him, didn't touch him, didn't speak, just watched. Every 5 minutes, his hands would twitch, like he was still fighting something in his sleep. That's when I knew Karen was never the boss, she was just the bait. The phone call from the night before still echoed in my head. Phase 4 wasn't hers to approve. We don't clean up messes, we bury them. They weren't scared of exposure, they were scared of me still breathing. The next morning, I drove 2 towns over to a warehouse Nate had converted into a digital war room. It was low rent, off-grid, and surrounded by busted vending machines in front of a landscaping company that never opened before noon. Inside, 3 monitors, backup generators, Faraday-shielded routers, and a smell like energy drinks and paranoia. Nate was already there, laptop open, hoodie up, eyes locked on code. Your license plate got pinged again, he said without looking up. Twice in Midtown, once near the freeway ramp. Traffic cams? Law enforcement? Nope. Private geo-flagged systems. They're pulling thermal signatures now. He turned the laptop toward me. Red outlines of me and Michael caught outside our house, pixelated, zoomed, labeled. They're tracking your heat, man. Not your phone, not your car, you. I nodded. Let's dig. We started with Safe Start, but Safe Start didn't exist. The number routed to a Connecticut law firm with no attorneys listed. That firm shared metadata with a Luxembourg shell company claiming to offer AI-powered civic innovation. That company was owned by a private holding group in Dubai. Their servers were filled with anonymized logs of civilian movements, financial behaviors, and buried deep, biometric files labeled Observer Cohort 4. Inside the folder, United States, photos, heat signatures, psych flags, Michael's sleep patterns, my post-deployment evaluations. They weren't running security, they were running behavioral simulations. How would people like me, military disciplined, emotionally damaged, respond to slow pressure, to humiliation, to the threat of removal? What would happen when you push just hard enough to spark violence? And then they documented the fallout. I sat back. Nate leaned forward. Dude, this isn't surveillance, it's a stress test. We traced the funding, shell nonprofits, community wellness grants, housing trust diversions, over $2.3 million routed through fronts like American Youth Uplift, the Suburban Equity Foundation, the Harmony Consortium. All fake. All washing money for one entity, Unis, a privatized risk analytics firm contracted by multiple U.S. federal sub-agencies for foreign predictive modeling. They just decided to bring it home. They weren't looking for criminals, they were looking for future threats. They weren't trying to stop crime, they were testing if they could pre-program guilt. Then we found the kill doc. Encrypted, tough, but not impossible. Nate cracked it. One file, text only, Stratton, John. Observer 714. A profile, volatility risk prior military trauma emotional stiffness family unit 1 minor 1 spouse mission report resistance level exceeded threshold phase 4 authorized objective neutralization preferable to intervention status pending clean team. Approval. I read it twice, then said nothing for a full minute. Nate, I finally asked, did they want you gone, man? And not in court? I didn't blink. They want a body. Jessica called at 5:12 p.m. Her voice was calm, but her words cracked something in me. He's gone. What? Michael? He left a note. Didn't say where. I found him behind the school, in the old batting cage, sitting on the concrete, hoodie up, no backpack, no phone. Just him. I didn't run, he said. I know. I just needed a break from the cameras, the whispers, from you. I sat beside him. I get it. He looked at me, not mad, not scared, just tired. You taught me how to fight, then told me to run? Which is it? I didn't answer because I didn't know. He looked away. They want you, not me. That's not true. Yeah, it is. They want you out of the way so they can rebuild me. But if I break now, it's not them who did it. He looked at me again, dead in the eye. It'll be you. That'll hit harder than any fist I've ever taken. Back at Nate's, I told him everything. Michael listened. Sarah held his hand. I didn't lie, I didn't soften it. When I got to Unitas, Sarah didn't blink. So what do? I said. We go public. Nate shook his head. Nope, not yet. They'll wipe it all, every bit of it. We need a living thread. You mean a witness? I mean someone inside. Then he showed me a still frame from a security cam, Phoenix location, grainy but clear, David Ha, vice chair, the guy who resigned for integrity, walking into a Unitas satellite office with a pass badge. Nate ran him through their escalation logs. David was never flagged, never questioned, never evaluated, not even listed as a variable. He turned to me. He was always part of the system. Michael stepped forward. So what now? I stood up. Now we find him, and we make him talk. I walked to the drawer, opened the lockbox, took out the old recorder I used in combat debriefings, checked the battery. Still full. I don't need a camera crew, I don't need a judge. I need 10 minutes in a room with David and a story the whole world can't ignore. We found David in a downtown parking structure, 3 levels underground. Not hiding, just parked like he was waiting for someone, like maybe this was already planned. But when he saw me, he didn't flinch, didn't reach for his keys, didn't ask what I wanted. He just said, "You're not supposed to be here." I said, "Neither are you." We brought him to the warehouse. Nate had blacked out the Wi-Fi, scrubbed the metadata. No signal in or out, no timestamps, no chance for David to text his backup, assuming he even had one. One folding chair, one bare bulb, one voice recorder. This wasn't revenge, it was preservation. David sat with his hands in his lap, wristwatch turned inward like he was still in control of time. "You don't have to do this," he said. "Do what? Pretend this is a war?" I leaned forward. "I'm not pretending anything. And if this were a war, you'd already be in pieces." I hit record. The red light blinked. He watched it. "You want answers," he said. "But you won't believe them. Try me." Silence, long enough for me to count the hums in the bulb. Then finally, "You don't understand what Phase 4 is. Then help me understand it." He smiled, tight and pitying. "It's not about Michael anymore." I slid a flash drive across the table. "We know about Safe Start, Unitas, Project Dove. We have thermal logs. Your name's on half the approvals. They needed someone clean, so you offered our neighborhood. I offered a test bed. You offered the reactions." His hand shook, slight, almost missed it, but I caught it. "Tell me about Phase 5. He blinked. "You're not cleared." I leaned forward. "I don't need clearance. I need the truth." He exhaled slowly, then flatly. "They're not just tracking behavior anymore, they're modifying it." "How?" "Pressure, proximity. They isolate a kid like Michael, flag him, then engineer the reaction of his family. They want to prove that trauma can be programmed and reversed inside a controlled HOA cell. So they create the pressure, then sell the cure." "Exactly. Behavioral obedience isn't the end game, reinforcement loyalty is." He pulled something from his pocket, a laminated ID badge, Eunice watermark. "This got me into Phase 5's logistics hub. Phoenix, they call it. The core. And it's not just computers, it's kids. It's influence. They're feeding Michael's data into emotional conformity modules. He's the proof of transition." That file stopped me cold. "So what happens to the proof once it's used?" David didn't answer. That was all the answer I needed. I stood, walked to the far wall, back turned. "Why'd you do it, David?" "Because I thought order meant peace. And now I know peace built on fear doesn't last." I stepped closer. "You help them take children. Silence. Veterans. Rewrite families. And I'll die for it if this ever leaks. Then give me something worth leaking." He hesitated, then nodded and started to talk. "What David gave us, names, internal agents, digital contractors, black badge teams assigned to Phase 4 cleanup across 14 neighborhoods, maps, distribution zones, suburban sentiment rings, risk color coding. Michael's role, he wasn't a test subject, he was a blueprint. Every reaction from him was marked, logged, mimicked in simulations. The shift they were preparing for, Phase 6, a national rollout. When he stopped talking, the recorder had filled an hour and 7 minutes. I hit stop, stared at him. He looked older, smaller. "If you go back to them, you die. If I stay with you, I die slower." I pocketed the recorder. "Then stay useful." Back at home, I told Sarah everything. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She poured me a glass of water and said, "Did he say why they chose us?" "Because we fight, and because we matter." Michael came downstairs later, eyes tired, voice low. "So I'm their blueprint." "You were. You said you were protecting me," he said, "but you walked me straight into their system. That one cut deep." I nodded. "Then I'll be the one to get you out." He didn't forgive me, not then, but he sat down beside me, and that was something. That night in the garage, I opened my personal file, Stratton, John. Threat level, VA 4. Notes, unstable, tactical mission fixated. I selected the whole thing and hit delete. They don't get to tell my story anymore. I loaded the full confession, renamed the file Operation Fall Line, and hit export. They used us like variables, measured us like threats, but they forgot something. I don't break, I detonate. And tomorrow, I'm lighting the fuse. I didn't sleep the night before the breach. I laid there, eyes open, every breath counting time I didn't have. Jessica paced the hallway in socks. Nate slept sitting up, one hand still on his keyboard. And Michael, he was downstairs, staring at the wall monitor, watching himself. "You good?" I asked. He didn't look away. "You said I was a template. You were so sure. What happens after tonight?" I paused. "They don't get to use you anymore." He nodded, then said, "Let them see me." We left at 2:42 a.m., van loaded, tools prepped, no backup, just the four of us, a hacked blueprint, and a name, the Core, a subterranean node under a disaster response shell in Phoenix. Heavily guarded, privately owned, publicly invisible. Nate had eyes on the thermal signatures. Jessica ran comms. Michael monitored the leak trigger from a safe house. His idea. "You said I'm part of this," he told me. "Let me be part of the end." I couldn't say no. We moved in through the water shaft, cold, cramped, reeking of bleach and fear. 12 feet down, 3 ducts wide, it opened beneath a blind security cam. Nate's doing. We hit the ground level at 3:08. 3 guards, non-lethal takedown, quick, silent, precise. Jessica watched our 6 while I cracked the main corridor. The compound inside was clinical, white walls, black glass, everything humming like it knew too much. We reached the core server chamber at 3:11. Biometric clock, retina scan, vocal ID, pulse sequence match. David's credentials worked, of course they did. The room was a cathedral of surveillance, rows of black towers, red lights blinking in rhythm, fans cycling through the memories of broken families. This wasn't a server room, it was a graveyard. Nate plugged in the drive. "We get 80% before we go live. Anything less, they can bury it." "How long?" 4 minutes. I scanned the racks, followed a side hallway, found the door, unmarked, unlocked. Inside, footage, not just files, simulations. Thousands of renderings, families, children, Michael running, crying, reacting, freezing. Every emotional pattern documented and remodeled. In the center was a holographic render, Michael, age 14, heart rate synced, scenario cycling. Screen above, red, Stratton flagged, adaptive model number 7, success rate 93%. They weren't watching him, they were training him. I copied the whole directory, then smashed the terminal with my elbow twice. Back in the core room. "We're at 82%, Nate called. "Go live." He hit execute. The signal bounced across 400 nodes, darknet drops, university vaults, 3 whistle servers under multiple country codes. Then the alarm hit. Red lights, system spike. 3 guards approached from the west hall. I neutralized one, Jessica disarmed the second, the third went for the alarm. Nate tripped the circuit breaker. Hallway went dark. We vanished. 2 minutes to mirror wipe, Nate said. "If we don't wipe the redundancy buffers, they can nuke the leak." I tossed Jessica the drive. "Get this to Michael." "What about you?" "I've got the fuse." I moved fast, dropped 4 shaped charges on the tower cores. Time delay, 45 seconds. Got ambushed in the hallway by a heavy, bigger, trained. We grappled hard, close quarters, concrete and bone. He got me to the ground, forearm to throat. Then Jessica appeared, fire extinguisher swing, back of the skull. He dropped. "You followed me?" "If they had my kid in those servers, I wouldn't leave either." We ran. Explosions chased us up the shaft like heat-seeking ghosts. Concrete shook, lights cracked, systems failed. Back in the van, Michael opened the drive. "Is this it?" I nodded. "All of it." He hit enter. Nate confirmed the sync. "It's live. The whole world's watching now." We sat in silence, no cheering, just the weight lifting off our ribs. An hour later, the first news site picked it up. 3 more followed. By noon, everyone. The leak included Phase 5 schematics, Safe Start's shadow contracts, Michael's adaptive model, Karen's audio clips, HOA emails, Eunice network maps, David's confession. People didn't react, they exploded. Parents, teachers, veterans, news anchors cracking on air. One anchor couldn't finish reading Michael's flag score out loud. Another pulled his earpiece and said, "I'm done pretending this isn't evil." Karen tried to vanish, but she was already a meme. Her boardroom quote, "You're not stable, John," went viral. Graffiti, hashtags, stickers on mailboxes. Michael watched it all, didn't smile, didn't flinch, just said, "Now they know what they did." The system didn't fall in one day, but its mask cracked, and underneath it wasn't order, it was obedience, manufactured, measured, broken. But Michael's model wasn't the dot, and the files we recovered only cover District 4C, which means somewhere out there, another family's being flagged, and next time, they might not have someone like me. So I'm staying ready, because I don't protect just my son anymore, I protect the blueprint. It's been 6 days since the leak. The neighborhood looks the same, sprinklers fire at 6 a.m., kids bike past the corner store, mail still arrives late. But now it feels different, because now they know. Michael doesn't flinch when the doorbell rings anymore, he checks it calmly, sometimes even answers it. Jessica sleeps longer now, still keeps the bat by the bed, but she hasn't touched it in 3 days. We don't talk about decor, not directly, but it's in everything. When Michael asks for space, I give it. When I ask him where he's going, he tells me. No fights, no fear, just mutual permission. And that's something you can't manufacture with rules, that's called trust. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. Nate's gone full ghost, moved to Seattle, new rig, new aliases. Still sends updates. The last one just said, restructured Safe Start, changed names, same blueprints. Watch the schools next. I told him I'd be watching more than that. David vanished. No charges, no footage, no whispers. Almost like someone higher up decided he'd served his purpose and then deleted him. Karen gave one interview. It ran for 7 minutes before they cut the feed. They blamed technical difficulties. I call it mercy. But this story, it was never hers, it was Michael's. His footage is still out there. Thousands of clips, millions of eyes, comments off for his sanity. He doesn't watch most of it, just one, the HOA board meeting, Karen's face when the vote was called. He watches it on repeat, sometimes not for revenge, just to remember that truth can win. Last night, we sat in the garage, same place I used to store medals no one asked about. He asked, "Do you think I'll ever be normal?" I answered, "Do you want to be?" He thought about it, then shook his head. "I want to be ready." And that was the moment I knew I didn't lose myself saving him, but I had to burn the parts that couldn't carry peace. Because protection isn't about hiding your child from the storm, it's about teaching them how to move inside it and never lose their name. So here we are. No medals, no headlines, just one house, one family, still here. And if you're hearing this, if you've seen what they built, then you know they failed. Because they trained me for war, but they forgot what happens when soldiers come home angry. And this time, they picked the wrong neighborhood.